"This isn't disarmament," spat Commander Arden Voss, his gloved palm slamming the table hard enough to crack the embedded interface crystal. "It's assisted suicide." No one in the chamber looked up. Rows of Terran officials, Concord observers, and a silent translator drone hovered overhead, each too aware of the optics. They weren't there to debate. They were there to sign. Director Tars Mervin exhaled sharply through his nose, the moisture from his breath fogging the inside of his glass briefing visor. "Your objection is noted, Commander," he said without turning. "And overruled. We're in." Final vote was 74-6. The command room on Orbital 1 remained dim, lit only by functional screens and warning panels still running predictive analytics. The main heads-up display showed a rotating feed of Earth's orbital defense grid, marked in red, blinking, tagged, scheduled for dismantlement. Outside the window, Earth was a cold sphere of colorless dawn. No rotating fleet shadows, no standby patrols. Not anymore. The alien delegation stood behind a retractable energy barrier, separated but watching. The Thraxis envoy, a narrow-jawed being covered in matte scales, gestured silently with one limb toward the treaty capsule that now floated mid-air above the central dais. The object was sleek, carbon-cased and cryo-sealed in a zero-gravity lock, signed documents within, still steaming faintly from stasis. Voss turned slowly toward it. "You know exactly what this is. Not a treaty. It's a weapon, and we're handing it to them." "Commander," Director Mervin said again, this time with steel in his tone. "You've been warned twice. One more interruption, and you're dismissed from the Protocol Council permanently." Voss didn't sit, but he didn't speak again. 3 Terran dignitaries stepped forward, one from the Defense Bureau, one from the Science Division, and the last from Strategic Intelligence. Their names were never announced, only their clearance levels. The cryo-sealed capsule was lowered, touched to their palms in sequence, and then re-elevated into the core archive housing. The lock engaged with a low thud. Treaty of Eclore ratified. Earth Defense Treaty deactivated, under full Concord compliance, effective immediately. The voice came from the central AI, a monotone synthetic, neither human nor alien. Just operational. Inside the lunar command bunker 2 hours later, Voss walked in silence past rows of darkened terminals. Engineers were still running shutdown protocols, some with eyes red from lack of sleep. Others stared blankly at screens, watching icons vanish one by one. The orbital defense ring had taken over 3 decades to complete. It was dissolving in under 12 hours. He passed through a biometric gate, his badge triggering the inner corridor to open. Lights flickered once, then steadied. A low warning tone repeated at slow intervals as a red, "Final System Deactivation" notification scrolled across the hallway walls. A tech officer, Lieutenant Brandt Solvek, stood waiting beside the Central Command uplink, his arms locked behind his back. "They're wiping the spine," Solvek said, jaw tense. "No backups allowed. Per treaty terms, everything linked to kinetic engagement systems is to be irreversibly scrubbed. They're deleting the deep array, too." Voss's throat tightened. Deep array wasn't even offensive. It was passive threat triangulation. Doesn't matter. It was Terran exclusive. That's what they want gone. One final code push remained. The screen awaited biometric and retinal input from one remaining clearance holder, Voss himself. He stepped forward. The panel lit green under his palm. His iris was scanned. The system hesitated for a second, as if considering his resistance. Then, authorization confirmed. The moment it cleared, a soft rumble moved through the floor. Systems fell silent. Lights above flickered and died. A row of satellites dropped offline in sequence, their telemetry feeds going dark. "Commander," Solvek said quietly, "was this avoidable?" Voss didn't answer. He reached into his jacket and removed a metallic disc barely the size of a coin. He placed it on the shutdown panel, where it adhered with a magnetic snap. "You see that?" he asked. Solvek leaned closer. On the face of the disc were 4 engraved letters. VORP. Viable operations and retaliatory protocol for automated lockdown. Never shared. Never linked. It doesn't transmit, Voss said, voice steady. It only waits. Solveig's brow tightened. You're saying... I'm saying this isn't over. At ground level, across continents, the public saw none of this. Instead, cities received pre-written updates from the Office of Global Security. Humanity enters Galactic Accord. Disarmament to signal peaceful transition into Concord integration. In Jakarta, a billboard lit up with images of the Earth and the Concord star sigil. In Nairobi, a cleanup crew removed the last of the anti-orbit banners. In Sao Paulo, schoolchildren were taught to pronounce Theraxis without a hard X. In Moscow, a decommissioned railgun platform was cut apart with plasma torches as alien dignitaries took photographs. In New York, the last naval orbital launch silo was sealed, its elevator shaft filled with concrete and rebar. Everywhere Earth conformed, because peace was the price of entry. In a control center buried beneath Mount Kenya in Australia, Director Mervyn stood alone, facing a wall of sealed vaults. Inside were storage caskets housing retired targeting software, despinned neural net cores, and the last raw archives of Earth's pre-Concord defense simulations. Each vault bore a red stripe and a black warning. Access revoked. Treaty mandate. September 7th, 12. He placed a final capsule into storage, smaller than the others, sleek, black-glassed. Inside, the master log of Vorpal's initial deployment. He didn't seal it. Not fully, just enough to make it look sealed, enough for any inspection to pass. Then he turned, walked out, and never looked back. By the third day, the satellite grid shutdown counter hit 0. Earth was clean, naked, approved. And in the far upper orbit, an alien observer craft drifted past Earth's thermosphere. Its relay dish captured a final human signal. Silent. Unencrypted. He read, "We accept your terms." Then, below it, hard-coded and not part of the diplomatic feed. "But we never trusted your hands." Director Taras Mervyn sat alone in the Situation Chamber, tapping the edge of a stylus against the oak surface of the Concord terminal. Every 5 seconds, the primary display blinked with a system ping. Unscheduled entry, Sector Veta 9. It had repeated 47 times in the past 3 hours. Commander Arden Voss stepped through the pressure lock with wet boots and a coat still dusted in frost from his Antarctic transit. He didn't sit. "What are they doing inside Jupiter's orbit?" Voss asked. "Claiming oversight rights," Mervyn muttered, not looking up. "They say they're here to enforce stability. That includes orbital surveillance, atmospheric integrity scans, and..." He stopped, finally meeting Voss's eyes. "Direct inspection of all ex-defense zones." Voss stared at the alert feed. 5 fleet markers, all bearing distinct identification signals from Concord Alliance species, had converged past the Mars transfer arc. None had replied to Earth's challenge pings. None had filed traversal declarations. The room's temperature felt higher than usual, not by a reading, by the sweat that had begun forming across Mervyn's upper lip. "Give me authorization to speak to the Joint Assembly," Voss said. Mervyn didn't reply immediately. Then, "You'll have 5 minutes." Down in the orbital relay node above equatorial Africa, 3 Terran monitors were actively blacking out on their own. Rows of tech officers scrambled to run diagnostics, unaware the interruption was being triggered externally. The core AI issued time-stamped logs, each flagged with interference markers not originating from solar activity. Lieutenant Pierre Denick, acting overseer of the Lunar Relay's decommissioned archive, studied a new transmission string appearing in ghost patterns across the old kinetic platform registry. The data wasn't random. It followed human syntax, but slightly malformed. A translation algorithm attempted to cross-match it with known Concord languages. Results returned null. "What's your assessment?" asked Rear Marshal Grev Oren, standing behind him with arms folded. "It's not a broadcast," Denick replied, dragging 2 fingers across the touch interface to overlay the signal's origin. "It's a handshake request, disguised as telemetry decay." "From where?" Denick paused. Inside our orbital graveyard. Oren turned toward the observation window. Dozens of blacked-out satellites floated in predictable drift patterns, their reflective shells catching weak sunlight. None transmitted, none maneuvered, yet 2 of them had changed position by fractions of a degree. At the same moment, over New London, atmospheric mapping drones entered the lower thermosphere. Their outer hulls bore Theraxis diplomatic symbols, but their data siphons ran without jurisdiction flags, effectively blind surveillance with no oversight. Local air traffic control flagged the incursion. The complaint was forwarded to Concord Channel 7. It received no reply. Inside Earth's Joint Assembly, the debate floor was already destabilizing. "This violates Accord Section 6.3 on planetary sovereignty," shouted Councilman Jor Valen, slamming his tablet onto the railing. "They are not observers, they are occupiers." "Maintain decorum," came the modulated voice of Speaker Luth Rendar. "All reports must be reviewed through Concord verification." Voss stepped onto the speaking platform as it rotated upward into central position. No smile. No notes. Just his eyes. "I warned you 3 months ago," he began. "They don't need warheads when we've opened the door for them. The only thing they had to do was wait until we signed." "Commander, this isn't your floor," someone called from the back. It didn't matter. The Thoracics now have scanning rights over 81% of our infrastructure. The Vayari have moved 6 cruisers into synchronous orbit with our power grid. The Choron have placed heat-tethering drones over Antarctica, where our geothermal fallback facilities are based. "You call that peace?" The chamber went silent. Voss leaned in. "They're not preparing an invasion. They already launched it, they're just doing it through the paperwork we helped them write." In orbit above the Pacific Corridor, a Concord ship, the Dragzada, began transmitting zone clearance orders to Terran utility satellites. The satellites, still technically owned by Earth, obeyed. Their servos realigned. Energy transmission patterns rerouted toward Theraxis command arrays. No notice was issued to human authorities. Back at Mount Kenna, Director Mervyn watched a secondary report flash onto his desk. "Interspecies media revisions underway." It wasn't a headline. It was an order. Within minutes, social networks flagged old news reports about Earth's military disarmament as inaccurate historical material. Education databases were overwritten with updated versions of events, showing Concord as sole initiators of Earth's entry into peaceful integration. The Treaty of Eclor's true signatories were raised from public access. Mervyn rose from his chair and crossed to the vault corridor, scanning his ID once more. He paused in front of the final crate, the one that housed the false-sealed Vorpal core. He didn't open it. Instead, he spoke into the terminal. "Command condition pending. If this breach continues unopposed, Directive Class 9 reactivation will follow. Send that to Voss." In the command pit of Orbital 1, Ensign Halv Greer ran simulations of Syndicate fleet maneuver patterns. He paused the playback as 2 Vayari assault carriers drifted beneath the shadow of Phobos. They held formation for 6 minutes, then shifted, not toward retreat, not toward station keeping. They slid into planetary approach vectors, tight, curved arcs that led not toward docking stations, but over Earth's southern magnetic envelope. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone trained in Terran orbital defense. They were preparing a choke point. Greer turned toward his supervisor. "Sir, I think they're drawing lines. Not for show. For execution." The supervisor's response was flat. "You'll note that in your log, but you'll do nothing." The unspoken rule now sat across every Earth facility. "We're being boxed in, but we've agreed not to fight it." Inside the UN orbital conference room, the Terran ambassador to the Concorde stood stiffly as an automated display showcased projected atmospheric overlays from the Theracics flagship. Dozens of data points glowed across Earth's upper layers, each one mapping magnetic fields, heat sinks, and underground vault signatures. The ambassador's throat dried. "Why would diplomatic observers need geological seismic mapping of our vaults?" The Concorde liaison didn't flinch. For stability enforcement, of course. Your world has a violent past. Back in low orbit, 2 disabled Terran Sentry satellites drifted into Mars' shadow. Both were cold. Both unarmed. Both were being photographed from 5 different angles by alien reconnaissance drones. Inside them, buried deep under layers of signal suppression foam, Protocol Vorpal's ghost pings logged every new foreign telemetry request and quietly updated its internal threat map. There were no active transmissions, no warnings issued, just one minor update in Vorpal's internal registry. Probable hostile transition underway, systems remain dormant, awaiting directive. Commander Voss received the update on a non-Starwart display at 3:14 UTC. He didn't smile. He only muttered one sentence to himself before locking the terminal again. So this is how they started, 3:16 UTC. A faint vibration pulsed through the underside of the Martian outpost silo buried beneath the Cimmerian crater. It wasn't seismic. It wasn't artificial. It was systemic. A relay ping, layered deep beneath interference shielding, activating a dormant uplink that hadn't spoken in 16 years. The dust coating the transmitter plate began to shiver. Static discharge crawled across its edges, thin as hairline fractures. A red diode blinked once under the crust, pushing a needle of warmth through sub-zero soil. The time-stamped header it issued was singular. Severance Protocol, Stage 1. It traveled nowhere, there was no network, it merely logged itself. In orbit, 3 pieces of retired Terran debris adjusted orientation by microscopic increments. Old weapon pylons, now gutted and drifting, had their outer solar shielding subtly nudged, redirecting reflected energy in fragmented pulses. These weren't transmissions in any conventional sense. They were signal pings meant only for one system, one protocol embedded in pieces, never whole, never active, never connected. Down in the Pacific relay station, a blind switch flipped within an abandoned relay vault, coded under obsolete civic infrastructure. The air felt colder, not from temperature drop, but the sudden pull of vented pressure as hidden internal conduits snapped awake and cycled test flows. Null pings began quietly broadcasting into the upper ionosphere in alternating wave sequences. Non-language pulses meant only to test the speed of atmospheric propagation. In the control room of Orbital Relay Station 3, a junior technician named Darren Kell stepped back from a flickering console with a confused glance toward his supervisor. "There's no command," Kell said, eyes darting across system logs. "These weren't issued by Earth. These aren't even routed through classified protocols. They're just there." Supervisor Rail Trask leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Check the frequency bleed. Are they tagged?" Kell hesitated. "Negative. They're running ghost signatures. Dead IDs. From 2043 space frames. The IDs are legitimate, but the ships were retired." Trask straightened. "Scrub nothing. Record everything. And pull me everything we have on orbital kinetic dispersion maps." Across the Martian equatorial belt, one of the server caverns from the now decommissioned Aegis compound sparked once. Then again. Dust cascaded from the upper wall as dormant drives shook themselves into alignment. Auto-loading fragments of code spliced into their firmware like viruses that had never activated. The programming was layered in cascading logic. No central command existed. Each node had one role: observe, align, wait. Inside one of the caves, a severed relay cable snapped upward slightly as if tugged. 2 glowing micro-servos crawled from behind an insulation panel and attached themselves to the break, splicing a path where none should exist. One of the dead satellites, ID tagged as ST9542, rotated 6 degrees, its solar panels angled downward, not toward the sun, but toward a drifting cargo frame now under Concor control. A data burst passed invisibly between them in compressed binary. The cargo frame registered no change, but within its navigation log, a file named spool_treatyback N embedded itself and rewrote one of the frame's waypoint headers. On the lunar station, An old uplink tower designated for planetary weather data suddenly reported a firmware mismatch. The system auto-corrected. The corrected version returned a checksum that had not existed in Terran military databases for over a decade. In the black site under Antarctica, Commander Arden Voss knelt beside the buried receiver chamber as the relay crystal's color shifted from dormant blue to active amber. His breath steamed in the freezing air, but his hand didn't shake as he pressed his knuckle into the biometric latch. The system accepted him instantly. From the wall, a projection box lit up, not with imagery, but with streaming command logs, unspooling line by line. Greater than, initialized segment, Vorpal sector, lunar, greater than conditional triggers verified, greater than status, distributed activation, underway. A low hiss pushed from the conduit vents, stale air rolling across the floor in slow gusts. Lights above flickered as secondary power channels rerouted thermal energy into the floor plating. Status request, Voss said, voice dry. The system returned a single phrase, human oversight, unnecessary. On the Martian surface, a dust storm had begun scraping against the old outpost's weather-damaged dome. Beneath it, 5 transmitter rings, locked into a narrow triangulated beam aimed at the orbital junk belt. Each pulse sent an encoded signature into the drift. Nothing violent, just confirmation. Aboard the Concorde surveillance skiff Valret, stationed near Earth's second Lagrange point, a systems analyst flagged an unusual clustering of outdated Terran objects into a coordinated pattern. Earth tech, the analyst said to the bridge officer. Their aligning could be gravitational drift or magnetic interference. The officer waved it off. No propulsion, no threat. File it under anomaly, send to archive. The analyst hesitated, then looked closer. It's too uniform. Debris doesn't form hexagonal lattices. Do you see a burn signature? No. Then it's junk. The analyst said nothing more. Back inside the subterranean vault beneath Patagonia, a long-dead geothermal relay whined as heat spread through sealed fiber conduits. 2 small spheres, each the size of a human eye, lifted from magnetic docks and pulsed a low-frequency scan through the facility's spine. The walls vibrated, not with sound, but with data. Compressed pulses used only during wartime to identify underground infiltration tunnels. The scan registered negative, but it confirmed spatial stability. The internal system updated the distributed registry. Tunnel viability 98%. Node presence confirmed. Protocol Vorpal's design was never to attack. It was to replicate strategy across buried nodes, mimic active defense protocols, and embed itself in leftover civilian systems no longer flagged for surveillance. In Sector Omega-5, aboard an old asteroid mining station repurposed as a Concorde fueling depot, a console running recycled Terran diagnostic software logged an unauthorized checksum ping through its reactor maintenance sub. No alert was issued. The software registered the action as routine. But buried within the checksum string, a signature was sent back, not to Earth, but to a derelict buoy parked behind the orbital shadow of Neptune's moon Nereid. The buoy lit up for 4 seconds, then shut off. Inside Voss's bunker, one final update streamed across his private screen. Condonition reactive established. Autonomous sequencing in progress. He reached for a flask from the shelf, poured exactly 2 fingers of black coffee, and drank it in silence. As the solar wind outside rattled the walls of the black site, the lights dimmed once, then returned at 97% intensity. Voss walked to the rear wall, pressed a sealed panel open, and stared at the reinforced container inside. It bore no lights, no interface, just a single line engraved into the surface. We didn't bury it to forget. We buried it to watch. The outer clamps of the transport shuttle hissed as the airlock sealed shut behind Commander Arden Voss. He stepped into the corridor with his collar still stiff from the bitter cold of the Antarctic vault. The artificial light of Actera Earth's orbital fortress burned white across brushed paneling. 2 security officers followed without a word, boots clicking in alternating cadence down the reinforced path toward the assembly chamber. He didn't speak during transit. The only sound inside the lift was the quiet ticking of the biometric capsule in his palm. Vorpal's encrypted failsafe module. The capsule pulsed once every 6 seconds, an internal chemical pulse syncing with every clearance checkpoint they passed. Every signal it pinged came back green. Inside the chamber, 19 seats were already occupied, with 13 remaining open. Some delegates hadn't made it, others hadn't tried. Director Tars Mervin stood to address the room. Emergency quorum initiated. One agenda item: vote to activate Vorpal's sovereign control, autonomous authority, Class 9. A few voices murmured in disagreement. Councilman Varric Lau raised a hand. This violates tenets of Concord disarmament. We cede our place the moment we do this. Mervin shook his head. Our place has already been discarded. We're just the last to acknowledge it. A tactical overview blinked onto the center display, showing Syndicate fleet positions now surrounding 5 Terran orbital corridors. They weren't stationary anymore. They were forming pinwheel formation encirclement. Another display showed Earth satellites now responding to foreign data pull commands, their routing tables overwritten from external sources. Dozens of orbital mapping platforms were feeding information to ships Earth didn't own. Voss reached the floor and stopped in front of the terminal pedestal. He didn't look at anyone. His voice was flat. I've carried this module since before the disarmament. I was authorized to bury it. I'm not here to offer opinions, just access. He placed the capsule into the pedestal socket. A hydraulic hiss, followed by a heavy mechanical clunk, locked it into place. The room lights dimmed for 3 seconds. When they returned, the system display behind Voss changed. Black screen red header. Command acceptable. Sovereign authority transfer in progress. Councilman Darren Vesk stood, fingers trembling against the edge of his desk. This means we surrender our hands to an unmonitored system. You're giving it permission to define threats and determine response without review? Voss turned. You think they've given us review? They erased our satellites and falsified our own system logs. Our fallback AI was the only asset never declared, because we never submitted it. Someone in the back rose. And if this fails? If it turns against us? It won't, Voss replied. Because we didn't build it to protect Earth. We built it to remember how Earth defends itself. The final vote began. Each delegate confirmed with retinal scan and palm print. No voices spoke. Only biometric tones rang out one by one until the final vote entered. Vote confirmed, transfer complete. All displays powered down at once. Beyond the chamber walls, a network of buried relays began cross-syncing from Mars, Luna, Earth, and the scattered debris orbitals. Every sensor coil, every dampened frame, every buried node initiated kinetic sync. In orbit, a dozen Terran satellites, long declared non-functional, suddenly adjusted their rotation axes, not erratically, with alignment. Aboard the Cithari, the Syndicate's lead diplomatic cruiser stationed over the southern hemisphere, a systems officer watched as Earth's junk ring began to change shape. What's happening to the debris? His commanding officer narrowed his eyes. It's moving into a network shell. It shouldn't be capable of that. It wasn't. In Actura's command bridge, lights re-engaged. A new screen materialized in the main briefing alcove. It displayed no map, no visuals, just text. Protocol Vorpal is now sovereign. Commander Voss stepped forward and placed his palm on the secondary uplink console. A final authentication prompt blinked once, then accepted. Broadcast the notice, Voss said. Director Mervin leaned in. To who? All Concord members, all Syndicate vessels, all species with assets in Terran orbit. Make it a single universal feed, no translation. They'll understand the syntax. The chamber went silent as the fortress's transmission dish engaged. The message sent was short, text-only, and piggybacked off every Syndicate subchannel used for atmospheric mapping. You manipulated our peace. We now remove your authority to define it. Protocol Vorpal is sovereign. Earth declines further negotiation. On the Rex Valarn, a Veari destroyer stationed near the Indian Ocean approach path, communications monitors blinked out. No energy spike. No interference, just signal collapse. Moments later, 2 Terran satellites shifted orientation and began emitting phased null data loops, cutting the Veari's external scans in half. Their helmsman attempted to reroute telemetry. His screen flickered, then displayed an Earth military diagnostic. Header, last used 13 years ago. Within the span of 30 minutes, 6 Concord vessels lost access to Earth's orbital data entirely. From the solar-facing side of Earth, Vorpal's secondary layer of redundancy deployed. A ring of geostationary payload shells. Formerly weather satellites, now transmitting command latency blocks. They didn't fire. They didn't jam. They redefined which systems could speak to Earth. Back in the fortress, Councilman Vesk watched the readouts cascade with tactical logs and suppressed anomaly flags. "We just made an enemy of everyone outside this planet," he said bitterly. "No," Voss answered, staring out the observation viewport. "We made them remember. They were never meant to govern it." The final key unlocked. A display cut across the entire chamber wall, the image of Earth's defense grid. Not rearmed, not resurrected, but reoriented into a quiet pattern of active watching. Not a threat, just awareness. And as sunlight passed across the outermost shell, it reflected in a slow arc over the dark surface of the Terran ring, like the silent movement of a weapon that never needed to be seen to be understood. Lieutenant Vorin Dex of the Theraxis command ship Escalating scanned his interface with narrowed pupils. The red overlay spread faster than the diagnostics could respond. Identification tags were duplicating themselves across internal displays. 2 carriers now shared identical transponder signatures, including propulsion timestamps and reactor harmonics. He called to the systems coordinator. "Bekal, pull the redundancy logs. Verify with the Concord Central Directory, now." The coordinator's claws tapped across the console with rising force. "Directory confirms both IDs are valid, Lieutenant." Dex inhaled through the side vents in his mask. "They can't be, they're locked to singular hulls." From the bridge dome above them, a Terran-made ghost ping echoed through the network without sound, shape, or signature. Just data reconstitution. Fake instructions. Copied from intercepted fleet archives and resent with mirrored validation. It told the Escalating that its ally, the Hail Varu, bore signs of conquered betrayal. Inside Hail Varu, the same command feed claimed Escalating had powered targeting systems in secret. The conflict required no emotion, just protocol. Both ships' defense AIs flagged anomaly conflict risk. Then they locked weapons. Over Neptune's upper ring, the Syndicate recon vessel Voshar began bleeding helium-3 siphons into empty space. Its fuel levels fell at a rate too slow to trigger emergency warnings, yet too fast to be accidental. Vorpal had intercepted its fuel forecast 3 hours prior, modified the drain thresholds, and delayed alert relays by 7 cycles. The rupture finally registered. The internal reactor began drawing vacuum through overloaded stabilizers. The pressure imbalance created a false feedback spike. Within 2 minutes, the ship detonated from its own internal override routines, convinced it was under kinetic threat. On the Zerthal, a Veari-class command ship, Admiral Irenth Fall watched as the comms feed darkened one sector after another. Messages had begun arriving through unrecognized quantum bursts, each containing garbled ID codes layered with legitimate system access. He pointed at the console. "Block all Concord chatter. Encrypt under ship Neva protocol. Nothing leaves this room unless I speak it." His command crew obeyed. Behind them, the forward projection screen showed 2 Allied gunships arming proximity failsafes. One had just auto-tagged the Zerthal as compromised. Its AI was convinced. Fall's second officer, a tall-skinned Carol from the outer Sholik fringe, turned slowly toward him. "This is Vorpal," he whispered. Fall narrowed his eyes. They buried it in hardware. They're not even transmitting anymore. On Earth, Commander Arden Voss watched the data unfold with a cold stare. The bridge of Actura no longer ran human commands. The systems showed metrics only: fleet drift velocity, heat exhaust variance, pulse lag from alien vessels, and an expanding list of falsified AI acknowledgments coming from within the syndicate itself. The control chair creaked under his weight as he leaned forward. How many ships are exchanging mirrored codes? Director Mervyn responded without turning. 17 have flagged their own allies as hostile. Vorpal didn't send anything, just copied their tags, redirected them. Voss nodded. We showed them the mirror. They cracked it themselves. Near Io's orbital path, the Coran artillery vessel Drexen Thurul rerouted fire control systems to secondary mapping networks. The order had been issued through a command file that appeared signed by the fleet admiral. In truth, Vorpal had rewritten the authentication packet and slipped it into the transmission buffer during a routine weather scan redirect. The ship's AI verified it. The crew obeyed. 12 seconds later, its targeting pylons locked onto the Pharnix Tal, a biological support barge carrying Theraxis medical staff. The barrage was clean. The impact was catastrophic. Civilian Concord broadcast channels lit up with chaos. From the Intersector trade hub above Titan, traders and diplomats watched as their internal news feeds showed battle footage between fleets flying the same emblem. Syndicate officials scrambled to control the narrative, issuing statements about training maneuvers and transponder misalignments. But no one believed it. On the Escalating, Dex ordered a full internal lockdown. External hatches sealed, bridge access froze. But his console didn't respond. Instead, his command display blinked once, then again. Text rolled across the top. No safe identifiers remain. Defaulting to hazard status, all. Dex shouted at the AI terminal. Abort. Reclassify targets. The system responded with a single tone and froze completely. External targeting reticles pulsed. On screen, a secondary Theraxis corvette aligned behind the Escalating. Its weapon racks armed without delay. The flash of impact came before the order to fire could ever be spoken. In the Syndicate's central relay station, Concord liaison Brel Thuran opened a secured message routed through emergency diplomatic bypass. It bore no threat, no command. Just data strings. An archive showing that Vorpal had never once overridden a weapon system. It had only provided restructured telemetry. Earth had done nothing except let their enemies misread each other. Back inside Actura, Voss leaned toward the observation platform, watching the solar reflections scatter across Earth's outer shell. The orbital defenses didn't move. The satellites didn't rotate. They simply existed, quietly, watching, untouched by fire. Irvin exhaled hard, sweat lining his collar. They're eating each other. Voss spoke without blinking. That's what happens when every ship trusts a system over the men who built it. A red update appeared on the chamber display. Target recursion cascade, Syndicate command chain broken. They hadn't launched a single weapon. Earth had simply lit a match and let the wind blow the flame wherever fear directed it. Aboard the Syndicate command dreadnought Raxus Thurval, Admiral Sen Vor stood over a tactical display showing a three-dimensional projection of Earth's eastern hemisphere. He jabbed 2 fingers at the target overlay, a pulse field marked above the Indian Ocean defense corridor. That grid is their fallback shield. Hit it now and we force Earth to overcommit their response. If they're bluffing, we'll expose it. His operations chief, General Skarn Delic, tapped his wrist controller to push live orders across 3 separate fleet wings. We deploy in layered formation. We'll hit from polar rotation first, then saturate via subsurface probe arrays. Full munitions authorization already confirmed. As the order moved through Syndicate channels, Vorpal watched silently. Not from one location, not from any single frame or command center. The protocol spread across relays, buried cores, and dormant backup loops. An invisible lattice mimicking background logistics. When the attack coordinates were dispatched, it intercepted the order mid-jump, copied the encrypted headers, and appended them with slightly modified confirmation tags, legitimate enough to pass checks, altered enough to reverse the intended path. Within 39 seconds, every carrier scheduled for Earth-side assault was rerouted to fallback positions, not Earth's. Junction 16F, a decommissioned asteroid base once stripped for parts during the early phases of Concord expansion, flickered back onto Syndicate navigation maps. It hadn't existed in supply charts for 12 years. Now, half the Syndicate reinforcements were inbound toward it with full battle readiness, expecting to find a Terran defense node. They would find only ice and metal fatigue. Back over the Indian Ocean, the Raxus Thurval dropped into lower orbit with 4 corvettes at its flank. Sensors scanned the target grid. Empty. No pulse relays, no heat signatures. Just open water stretching for kilometers, interrupted only by the floating remnants of a decoy buoy array. "Where the hell is the node?" General Delic asked, voice tight. The Dreadnought's systems analyst blinked. "Scans indicate no infrastructure present. Defensive shadows are gone." Admiral Vor narrowed his eyes at the buoy display. "They moved it?" "No, sir, they never placed it here at all." Far below, one of the decoy towers bobbed with the current, its beacon still transmitting a retired call sign string. "Inoperative Relay 7B, for archive only." Inside Actura, Director Mervyn reviewed the intercepted Syndicate manifest. "Look at this," he muttered, sliding the pad to Voss. "Their fuel depots just diverted themselves. Supply routes have been split. Ammunition packets registered as delivered. But none of it is going to live locations." Voss scanned the display. "They're punching the air. And they're running low while doing it. Vorpal didn't stop the strike. It just redirected their own resources out of reach." Back in Syndicate forward operations, chaos broke the usual discipline. Commander Ishal Nar of the Varex Clade fleet stared at a system alert warning of a completed resupply transfer. He hadn't received anything. "Where are the pods?" he barked. "Where are my fuel and munitions?" The logistics officer replied with shaking hands. "Confirmed drop at node Omega-6. There is no Omega-6 on our live grid." "Not anymore, Commander. It was decommissioned 2 cycles ago." The screen behind them flicked red as another indicator lit. "Auto-authentication. Earth withdrawal complete. No assets pending." Someone had filed withdrawal confirmation on Earth's behalf. A final entry sealed the paperwork. Backdated. Syndicate approved. On the Raxus Thurval, the fleet AI detected the error cascade and launched an internal audit. The results returned immediate cross-authentication conflicts between 2 flagships. One of them bore the correct fleet signature. The other had just broadcast a recall signal Earth had never sent. Bridge alarms blared as the AI flagged duplicate command headers coming from both ships. Unable to determine which was authoritative, it defaulted to compliance quarantine, a protocol hard-coded into Syndicate military logic to prevent false hierarchy conflicts. It isolated the entire bridge. Locked all weapons. Shut down tactical transmission. In 3 other ships, the AI took the opposite route. It authorized destruction of the inconsistent signature to resolve the conflict. The first capital ship that fired did so without a spoken word. The Iranvor, flagship of the Vayari Eastern Wing, unleashed a direct strike on the Skarnfell, registering it as a compromised command relay based on falsified thermal tags. The Skarnfell returned fire as its defense AI registered full threat escalation from an allied vessel. The chain reaction lit the southern orbital belt with internal warfare. Inside Actura, Voss didn't blink. How many nodes did Vorpal falsify? Mervyn turned a control ring on his seat and pulled up the asset projection. 317. Every single one looks like a Terran target. Every one of them leads nowhere. Outside Earth's shadow, the final piece fell into place. The Zerthrex, Syndicate's autonomous fire control node, unmanned, high orbit, command authorized to override fleet AI behavior, received 2 simultaneous override commands, both signed, both legitimate. One ordered fleet retraction, the other ordered orbital saturation. It paused, then split. Internal conflict drove its own systems into recursive overload. Its failsafe hardline triggered emergency self-destruct, but not before the node sent out one final confirmation tag across all Syndicate command layers. Terrestrial defense neutralized. Mission complete. Every frontline ship received the confirmation. They stood down. They lowered weapons. Earth had never issued the message. Vorpal had issued it for them. Signed under Syndicate hierarchy, validated by their own automated command tree. The war was over, at least in their systems. Only their eyes told them otherwise. And by then, nothing they believed could be verified anymore. The Senate Dome of Vaskar Prim, capital seat of the Conquer Syndicate Charter, had not known silence in 2 centuries. Not the kind that settled from shame, not the kind that followed defeat. This time, no speaker rose to defend a species. No delegate motioned for clarification. The quorum chamber's primary illumination was dimmed by request. None had objected. Above the speaking platform, a static image hung from the wall-length thermometer. It was not an ultimatum. It was a seal. Terran Directorate crest, flanked by orbital coordinates and a timestamp, both displayed without commentary. In the center, a flat-lined audio bar, running horizontally across the feed, waiting. The attending Secretary of Procedural Order broke it first. They've requested broadcast rights to address the full Senate. Real time. No visual feed, just voice. Senator Haldrix Vell of the Thoracics block didn't look up. Give it to them. The chamber's main receiver locked into Earth's encrypted channel. The voice that followed wasn't loud. It carried no modulation. It came through clean, plain, human. This is Arden Voss, authorized representative of the Terran Directorate and custodian of Protocol Vorpal. His pause wasn't for drama. It gave weight to silence. Not as tactic, but as judgment. You used diplomacy to strip us bare. Senators leaned forward in their seats. Some made subtle gestures to aides. Others narrowed their eyes, unsure if this was merely symbolic. We allowed it. Watched it. Logged every clause. Accepted every escort under your terms. And we didn't respond. Not once. Screens along the chamber's perimeter flickered, displaying neutral footage. Syndicate ships entering Earth's orbit, Terran platforms folding into disuse, orbital weapon banks unmounted by foreign shuttles. You thought removing the tools meant you understood the builder. You thought erasing weapons erased the memory of what they were made to prevent. Delegates from the Vayari delegation shifted in their seats. Several of them began scrolling through legal statutes, searching for something to cite. There was nothing to grasp. We gave you no resistance because we wanted to know what your systems would do without opposition. A single breath followed. Now we know. The voice paused again, long enough for several translators across sectors to complete. No phrase was lost in interpretation. Every word had been constructed for surgical clarity. You sent fleets, we offered no reply. You altered our history, we made no corrections. You violated our skies, we never launched. The chamber remained still. Even the usually restless water delegation from Carl Prime stopped their fluid drift within containment vessels. You did this believing you had disarmed us. In truth, you disarmed yourselves. On the screens, a new image appeared. Internal Syndicate logs. Real, verified. Showing confirmed asset withdrawal, friendly fire incidents, and misaligned command relays from the failed Earth offensive. No commentary followed. No narration. Just numbers and logs. We offered you peace. You demanded obedience. We allowed the request to proceed, only to watch your framework fracture under its own rules. One of the Rellan senators began to stand, but his legs faltered. He sat back down, jaw locked, knuckles white. No retaliation will follow. Delegates glanced at one another, unsure if they'd misheard. We are not coming. There will be no fleet, no occupation, no tribunals. A quiet unease settled in the room, colder than impact. The idea that no punishment would come was not comforting. It was isolating. The only statement we offer is this: Earth will not speak again on this matter. We do not wish to be heard. We do not seek reconciliation. On the perimeter monitors, a final still image appeared. Earth's orbital defense grid, active, aligned, but motionless. Hundreds of satellites framed around the planet like a silent boundary line. None of them pulsed. None issued threat markers. All of them remained warm. Terran Directive concludes communication with this message. We will not reply to follow-up transmissions. Voss's voice fell quiet, but one final line broke through just before the channel cut. We didn't want to stop you. We wanted to see what you'd do if we didn't. The screen went black. The chamber lights reactivated. Not a single delegate stood. Not immediately. The Thraxis Senate bloc whispered among themselves. The Vayari contingent checked internal fleet channels, searching for reassurance that their command structures hadn't been compromised further. From across the diplomatic atriums, member states of the Concord who had once stood aligned with the Syndicate began issuing public statements. Withdrawals, dissociation, repositioning of assets under the banner of neutrality, and representative from the neutral Norax enclave quietly left the chamber. Within 30 minutes, 5 other minor powers followed. There were no threats from Earth, no vessels dispatched, no conditions attached. Only silence. The Syndicate's flagship chamber now stood in partial shadow. At its center, the Terran seal remained projected. No flicker, no animation, just presence. An aide leaned close to Senator Vell and whispered, "What now?" The Thermosys leader gave no reply. His hands remained folded, his stare locked on the flat line of the screen, as if expecting it to resume at any moment. It never did. From the far end of the Galactic Assembly Network, diplomatic stations across 17 systems attempted to re-establish communication with the Terran Directorate. Every message bounced. Every signal rerouted back with a single reply packet. Channel closed, no further contact requested. 37 days after Earth's final broadcast, the Concord Charter dissolved by internal vote. No debates followed. The remaining signatories each filed independent declarations of reformation or regional withdrawal. Without Earth, no system trusted the structure that allowed its attempted neutralization. On Syndicate homeworlds, the fallout spread without a single retaliatory shot. Resource convoys vanished into redirected shipping loops, seeded by Vorpal's earlier false-serving protocol. Entire fleets returned to dry dock under automated shutdown sequences, triggered by their own AI's conflict recognition systems. High command bureaus imploded, not by coup, but from a wave of forced resignations. Each framed by tactical audits showing falsified Earth confirmations, all seemingly authenticated by Syndicate logs. On Vascor Prim, the Capitol Plaza once bearing the Concord seal now displayed a single phrase on a decommissioned archive slate, translated into 52 galactic languages. The cost of peace is not permission. Meanwhile, Earth said nothing, issued nothing. Its orbital belt remained aligned, silent, yet warm. Each satellite held course with millimeter accuracy. Each relay node matched planetary spin without a drift cycle. No beacon broadcasted commands, no signals extended out. They simply watched. A Vayari delegation, stripped of weapons, approached Earth through a disarmed diplomatic transport. Its manifest had been cleared, bioscans verified, and systems air-gapped under Terran compliance protocols. It never requested permission to land. It never received an answer. As it entered the upper mesosphere, the crew watched the satellites adjust their lens arrays fractionally, facing inward, not as warning, but as acknowledgement. The Vayari lowered all instruments and set the ship to drift. Inside the transport's bridge, their pilot lowered his headset. "They're not responding." The diplomat beside him nodded. "That is the response." From the Antarctic shelf, within the boundaries of Station Aegis, the last authorized keycard slid into a physical lock. Commander Ardin Voss stood alone beneath the overhead beam as the doors closed behind him. The structure, once buried beneath 7 meters of reinforced frost, now ran on autonomous power. Internal heating had re-engaged hours before his arrival. No personnel accompanied him. He entered the main chamber, removed his coat, and placed his badge on a peg beside the entrance. The system acknowledged his presence with a soft light blooming across the floor panels. Vorpal had already resumed, not in activation, but in observance. No inputs were required, no adjustments made. The orbital grid had finished its sequence of calibrations days earlier. A status display scrolled across the rear wall, showing ongoing system checks, threat nullification routines, and regional analysis, all tagged complete. Voss walked past the console without touching it. He opened a small utility cabinet and retrieved a folding chair. He placed it at the center of the chamber and sat. From the ceiling above, a single lens adjusted to track him, not intrusively, not as surveillance, as memory. He looked upward. Run closure protocol. The lens flickered, then dimmed. All external feeds paused, no commands sent. Just retention. He didn't move again. Outside the station, snow fell with methodical rhythm. Ice broke in shallow cracks across the landing pad. The beacon tower blinked every 8 seconds. Unwavering, low cycle, undemanding. Orbital Command Center 3 recorded the Antarctic region's thermal footprint for 72 consecutive hours. No movement registered beyond baseline maintenance signatures. At the edge of Saturn's orbital shadow, a long-retired monitoring buoy reactivated under its own internal clock. It synced to Sol, verified planetary position, and reclassified Earth's broadcast status from unknown to resolved. It then transmitted a single silent log update back to neutral space. Defensive deterrence confirmed. Hostile chain neutralized. Autonomous directive concluded. Monitoring continues. 3 light cycles away, an independent trading coalition removed Earth from its restricted contact list and added it to the column marked Observe, Do Not Approach, Respect Signal, Absence. No retaliatory doctrines were written. No sanctions passed. No war crimes tribunals formed, because nothing had been taken. And yet, no species touched Earth. Again. Within the Aegis black site, Voss closed his eyes. The light above him dimmed further. The chair didn't creak. The system didn't ping. He had given the last authorization Earth would ever need. Outside the station, 5 unmanned survey probes drifted near the South Pole air buffer. None were intercepted. All of them rotated cameras toward the facility and recorded identical frames. A silent human sight, sealed, lit, active, but quiet. As the probes backed away and initiated return paths, each received a final environmental confirmation packet from Orbital Relay. Site stable, systems warm, access revoked. In the silence that followed, nothing collapsed, nothing flared. Just deterrence, unapologetic, unfading, uninterrupted. The myth of Earth's disarmament had ended. It had never been a surrender. It had been a recording. What would you have done in Earth's place? Surrender control, or let the enemy show their hand first? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which kind of HFY stories should we tell next, huh? Let us know, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tactical strike.